Everyone's favorite region, Kanto, fuck yeah! Let's face it, Game Freak loves to pander to Generation 1, and we, the fanbase, eat it up like chocolate cookies. Probably because we've been there 4 times already, even more if we count the virtual console releases separately. So it's no wonder it feels like home. My point is that it's just a matter of time before we revisit Kanto. So I thought I'd talk a bit about my ideas on that inevitability. Hopefully, you noticed that I didn't say Kanto remake, but revisit. The whole remake thing has become really stale and uninspired by now, at least to me. So I'm hoping that the concept as a whole will eventually get replaced by something more radical. While remakes are about recreating a past adventure, when I say revisit, I'm thinking of a new adventure in a familiar place but set in a different time frame. In that sense, there have been 2 instances of games so far where we revisited a region. The Kanto Re-Visit in Gold and Silver's post-game, and even more direct Unova Revisit in Black and White 2, which happened within the same generation Unova itself was introduced. On the surface, most of us are probably anything but excited at the thought of revisiting Kanto, but when I start thinking about it more in depth, and see it as potential for making revisits the new norm, I actually start wishing that we will get a Kanto Re-Visit before anything happens with Sinnoh. And I freaking love that region, by the way. Simply because it would increase the chance for a Sinnoh Revisit instead of a bland Diamond Pearl remake with a butchered Platinum episode where we fight a non-event Arceus on the moon after throwing a single quick ball at Ultra Giratina. And don't get me wrong, the Delta episode was fun and I'm all for making mythicals available in-game. But when they decided to pretend that the objectively superior plot of Emerald didn't exist, it felt like they punched one of their best games in the face. Sorry, I'm getting off track. Kanto, it's hard to stay focused on it. Because we've been there so many damn times, slapping on some Megas and a Mew episode won't fly with a new Kanto game anyway, so they would have to do something new with it. Or am I already too optimistic about this? Anyhow, I'd say set it 20 years after the events of the originals. But wait, no, not after the originals. 20 years after Gold and Silver's version of Kanto. After all, that's the most recent canonical iteration of it. The last thing I'd want to see is a new Kanto game that ignores the upgrades Generation 2 brought to it. For example, with the Yoto games, we found out that a bunch of dark Pokemon are actually native to Kanto, and they've probably always been there, there just wasn't a nighttime yet. So naturally, a new Kanto would have those available in part of its new regional decks. But you know what this means, right? We're not just talking about a distant Kanto sequel here. Kanto and Yoto are connected, and it would make no sense whatsoever to break them apart now. So one interesting aspect, and potentially big selling point of a Kanto Revisit, would be that Yoto would be part of the game as well, but this time the roles would be reversed, with Yoto becoming the post-game region in this story. I mentioned original decks, so it's worth pointing out that regional decks weren't even a thing the first time we've been there. It would make perfect sense to make a proper regional decks for Kanto from scratch. Which to me sounds like a great idea anyway, because the original dex order has plenty of questionable parts. I took some time and tried my best to make a new Kanto dex of my own, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a separate video. Now, imagine completely new protagonists in a refreshed Kanto, where things have changed even more than in Generation 2. The way you go about exploring the region has changed around. Snorlaxes might be blocking different routes this time. The order of the gyms has definitely changed, with several of the gym leaders being replaced by some younger relatives. Some of the gyms might have actually changed their types, or been closed completely and replaced by new ones elsewhere. Heck, maybe Kanto and Yoto even decided to have a shared league. There is certainly lots of possibilities here. What about the villains? Is Giovanni back? Or maybe his son started something big instead by now? At this point you might be thinking, slow down, won't all these drastic changes destroy all of our childhoods? Depends on how it's done. If the game would go back to zero and offer a completely unrelated new adventure that pretends to replace the original adventure, then yes, it would be destroying our childhoods. But if instead it's set in the world we know, merely set 20 years later, to tell a new story on top of the old, with direct references to the old adventure and characters along the way, now that's the right way to do it. Yes, some famous gym might be gone, but that means you might run into its former gym leader in some other situation, and see how they changed, and find out what they've been up to. Or imagine going into the newest Elite Four, where between the new faces you would realize, holy crap, Bruno is still in there! My point is, the less common things that would stay the same would have an even bigger impact because they withstood the change of time, and the things that wouldn't stay the same open up potential to have their lore expanded or become rediscovered elsewhere. Okay, the childhoods are not just saved, they are being cherished and built upon. One crucial thing is still missing though. No, something more important than Pokemon following you. Please don't kill me. What I mean of course is new Pokemon designs. The obvious and easy option here is to add new Mega Evolutions. And sure, there are still a handful of perfect candidates left, Arcanine, Clefable, Machamp, Dragonite even. But overall, the first two generations have gotten big selections of Megas already, and for some reason, I have a feeling that Game Freak are going to keep Megas in the fridge and only reintroduce them once we go back to Unova. And the reason I think that might be related to the fact that the biggest generation ever has only had a single Mega, while generations 1 through 4 have been covered quite well. Also, it'll be a bigger deal if Megas only happen to come back after so much time that people will already have started to doubt their return. Or maybe I just don't want even more Mega Charizards. Although, if Megas are kept into the post-game anyway, Mega Yoto starters? So what's the other option? Am I suggesting the Kanto Re-Visit would actually add new Pokemon upwards of number 802? Well, let's not forget that Yoto, being a direct sequel to and including Kanto, didn't shy away from adding new Pokemon, so making Kanto Yoto Re-Visit a smaller new generation at the same time is not completely out of the question either. Those could mostly be about the return of actual cross-generation evolutions. Or they could be about discovering some new species that weren't discovered before because everyone was busy checking out the more urban sides of the regions. What if it turns out Kanto has hidden mascot legends of its own that are slowly getting intolerant of all the urbanization and pollution? But I concede that this would be the most unlikely part so far. Especially when there is a far more elegant option still left to think about. Remember how Alola had Pokemon who migrated from Kanto which adapted and gave us the so much loved Alola forms? With how heavily it's referenced in Sun and Moon, it would make perfect sense for Kanto to tackle this gimmick in its own way. Of course, you can't make Kanto forms of Gen 1 Pokemon, which is great because considering we're talking about revisits of Kanto, the pandering is already on the deepest level. So surely there have been Pokemon migrating over from other regions that have now all become poison types. I mean adapted to Kanto in diverse and interesting ways, of course. Like maybe Hippopotas was brought to the Safari Zone and turned into a water type. And perhaps some Timbers have migrated to Vermilion in order to finish the stupid building. Some Snorrons that initially went to shiver in Seafoam Islands but then ended up sweating on the new Cinnabar Volcano dungeon. Beware with eyebrows! The potential is endless. To top it all off, we could see the return of the Battle Dojo from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, with tons of daily rematches with old and new gym leaders. The SSN could be turned into some kind of battle facility. Legendaries like Mewtwo or the Yoto Beast could get their own post-game episodes. And Mew could be under a truck! I mean, maybe we could encounter a non-event in-game one this time. Or have Celebi show us some places that have changed the most, or make us witness some events that happened 2 decades ago. So, in conclusion, after thinking about this matter more thoroughly, the idea has really grown on me. And now I have essentially put you up for a huge disappointment, in case next year we'd bear witness to an announcement of 3 remakes, with the same bland copy and paste approach we've seen before. You're welcome! See ya!